It's time for Drummer Nation. My guest today is industry veteran Rick Drumm. After his beginnings as a performer, Rick joined Remo in 1982 as a customer service rep and was soon promoted to sales and marketing director. In 93, Rick was hired as the CEO of MIDCO International, a large musical instrument distribution company. After 3 years at MIDCO, he was hired by Vic Firth to serve as president. In 2006 through 13, he served as president of D'Addario, where he worked to significantly reduce industry threats of counterfeit musical accessories. In 2013, Rick founded Traction Business Coaching to help businesses achieve their goals. Through it all, Rick has continued to play the drums. Sound Synergy's percussion care lubricants and conditioners include a series of 3 products for total drum kit care and maintenance. Percussion Care products in your gig bag ensures your entire kit will always look and sound its best. Check out their website at soundsynergies.net.
I absolutely love playing drums, and I couldn't imagine not having that in my life. And I really, if I could help facilitate that and have an impact on your life so that you can play drums, that means the world to me.
Created specifically for practice sessions, quiet tone practice cymbals by Sabian are designed to respond and feel like traditional cymbals, right down to their clearly defined bell, so the drummers won't have to change the way they play. Quiet tone practice cymbals by Sabian.
Hi, this is Stanton Moore. I've been playing and teaching drums for over 30 years. My new site, Stanton Moore Drum Academy, is the perfect online drum learning platform for any level drummer to learn how to play the drums the same way I did. I'm looking forward to seeing a lot of you as subscribers on the site, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun.
My guest for this episode of Drummer Nation is an industry veteran by the name of Rick Drumm. Hi, Rick. Thank you for doing my show.
Hey, Michael. Thank you for having me on.
Well, you're one of the industry's stalwarts with all kinds of experience, man. Let's go back. I know you grew up pretty much in a music store, right?
I grew up in West Springfield, Massachusetts, and my dad, Ronnie Drumm, had a music store back then, and basically from day one of my life, I grew up inside his store, so I learned retail early on, and he was a great trumpet player, and I started playing professionally with him at the age of 13, and then I started playing different shows, circuses, things like that as they came through town. He was a contractor for the musicians in the Springfield, Massachusetts area.
So what got you involved with the drums?
Well, actually, I started on trumpet at the age of 4. And then I was visiting cousins down in Connecticut, and they had horses, and I was walking the corral. I slipped and broke my left arm.
Oh.
And so as I was recuperating, my father thought maybe taking some drum lessons along with the trumpet would be good rehab. And I just kind of fell in love with the drums, and I said, Dad, I'm leaving the trumpet, and I'm going drums exclusively. Turned out to be a pretty good decision.
A good move. I had a cousin drum story when I was a little kid. My cousins, we went to visit, they had a family band. And when they played for us and when they stopped, I immediately just sat down at the kit. And you know how it is, within a few seconds you go, this is it.
Yeah, and my story is kind of like the same as so many of our age, where the Beatles were just hitting, and basically the broken arm and Ringo got me started on drums.
Well, Jules Follett, I know, and she did that great book with all these drummers, and I remember her telling me the common thread on all of them of us of a certain age
absolutely.
is Ringo. And for me, I was into Buddy and Louie and all that stuff, and it took me a minute to get Ringo, but when you saw the Beatles, you're like, man, how cool is that? That's something I got to do.
My dad had a big band, and so of course I was very much into Buddy and Louis Bellson, and then I ended up studying with Ed Shaughnessy.
That's what I was going to ask you next. You were close enough to Manhattan to go down for lessons, right?
It was a 3.5-hour bus ride from Springfield down to the Port Authority, and so I won a National Endowment for the Arts travel study grant when I was finishing up the 8th grade. And that's when I was just getting started with Ed. So my freshman year and sophomore year of high school, I would go down to New York every other week to take my lesson with Ed, which was normally about an hour and a half lesson. And then at the end of my lesson, I walked over to NBC with him, which was over at Rockefeller Center, and go up to Studio 6B and take a seat behind Ed as they were rehearsing the Tonight Show, for all the music acts that were going to appear that night. And so it was, I did that for 2 years. It was a great experience at a young age. And guys that were on the band at the time were, Clark Terry was a regular sub. Snooky Young was on the band, and Richard Davis was on bass. And of course, Ross Tompkins and Doc and Tommy and all those guys. So it was great.
Well, we have some similarities there as well. I lived in Los Angeles in the 80s, and I had a friend who worked at NBC. And I would look and see who the musical guests were at the Tonight Show and go catch the rehearsal. I went, guests you would bring to see the show, if you had family coming in or something. But it took hours and hours. I'd just go blow in and catch the rehearsal and split. By the way, and Ed was there then. He moved to L.A. with the show. And he was a dear friend towards the end of his life. Of mine, I'm happy to say. But I just saw Doc this week. Doc Severinsen. I heard him play this week, and man, he's 90.
90.
That's a young man's game, playing trumpet. And he still has this giant, majestic sound, like Pops, like Armstrong for the younger viewers. Just majestic. And they played to that, they didn't try to do bebop tunes at 300, but what they did was perfect for him. And I got to meet him and hang, and what a great guy. But it reminded me of those years of listening to him on the Tonight Show. So where were you studying in Manhattan? Was it at, what shop?
Henry Adler's.
That's what I thought. So that was when they had that great lineup of teachers, right? Tell us who was there then.
Yeah, well, actually, I would go up in the first studio on the left. As you went up these stairs to the second floor, and the first studio to the left was a mallet teacher by the name of Doug Allen. So I took some lessons with Doug. He co-wrote the Phil Krause method books. And then that first studio on the right was Ed Shaughnessy's. Next studio was Joe Casadas. And then the next studio was Sandy Feldstein, who took Saul Goodman's studio when Saul left. And then at the end was Sonny Igo. So that was the lineup. And there was just one bare light bulb in that hallway. And there was usually one or two chairs, that were positioned outside the studios. And so when the Tonight Show moved out west in, I think it was June or July of 71, I continued my studies there with Sonny Igo, who's, of course, the father of Tommy Igo.
Right. So at some point you end up gigging as a drummer, a working drummer, right? Like most of us who ended up in the industry, we all began as working drummers. I know you had a lengthy career playing.
Hey everybody out there in cyber world, this is Adam Nussbaum.
Hi, Dave DeCenzo here.
Hi, Bermuda Schwartz here.
Hey everyone, Stanton Moore here.
Hey guys, Johnson Pesta here.
Hey everybody, this is John J.R. Robinson.
Hi, Todd Zuckerman here for the Drum Center of Portsmouth. They're knowledgeable, they'll be able to help you and guide you and make the right choices for you and the music that you play.
From Wingnut to Wuhan, these chaps know what they're talking about. Highly recommended. But what do I know? I'm a drummer.
Yeah, so when I got out of high school, I had won a full boat scholarship to North Texas State University, but then I was gigging right out of high school, and I knew I wasn't ready for college, and college wasn't ready for me. So I blew off that scholarship. At 18, you know everything, of course, right?
Yeah, you're brilliant and bulletproof.
Yeah. So I got a gig, went on the road for about a year, and then I went into the Air Force and joined the NORAD band, North American Air Defense Command band. Mm-hmm. I was based at Peterson Air Force Base in Colorado Springs. And that was in 1974. And, Vietnam was winding down, but there were some great guys that came out of that band Great musicians like Bobby Shue, great trumpet player, and Phil Wilson, a great trombone player that taught at Berkeley for many years, and great drummer by the name of who had gone through the band and unfortunately passed away, a guy by the name of Steve Bohannon, who was a drummer with Don Ellis. So when Don Ellis, who had that great big band that was doing all those very strange, odd time signatures, was going strong, Steve was a drummer, and Steve was driving back and forth between Los Angeles and Colorado Springs, and unfortunately got killed in an accident.
Oh, how horrible! I don't know that name, but I know the Don Ellis band I used to listen to. So you moved to, you were still doing this based out of New England?
I'm sorry?
You were still gigging based out of your home in New England, or did you move to LA? Or?
Well, after the Air Force, actually, which I did for 4 years, during my time there, the last 2 years I was in the Air Force, my dad had closed up his music store and became musical conductor of Ringling Brothers Barnum and Bailey Circus, the Blue Unit. And so as I was just beginning my last year with the Air Force, the drummer that he had been using gave him a full year's notice that this was going to be his last year. So my father called me up in February of 77 and asked if I would be interested in doing the gig when I got out of the service. And I was scheduled to get out in February of 78. And but the circus would go into rehearsals in November of 77. So anyways, the Air Force let me out 3 months early, actually, so I could take the gig. As it turned out, there was a 10% cutback in the band's program. And there was first African-American 4-star general that was in charge of NORAD by the name of Chappie James, and he had been a Tuskegee Airman, and he flew combat in Korea and Vietnam, and his hobby was singing, and he was really tight with Sammy Davis Jr. So he had contacted Sammy to see if we could get some copies of the arrangements that Sammy used, and he graciously had the copies made, sent out to the band. And when Chappie was feeling a little stressed, he would call the band commander and said, "Hey, can I come over and rehearse with the guys?"
Washes off the dust of the day, as Art Blakey used to say, right?
Yeah, and so let's just say whenever we did a gig at the Officers Club, Chappie opened, and he was actually really good. And needless to say, he got a standing ovation every time he performed. And then so when I had requested this early out so I could take the gig with the circus, band commander said, General James would like to see you. So I had to go down to N Air Force Base, which is now the Olympic Training Center, downtown Colorado Springs. And Chappie asked if I would reconsider and consider making the Air Force a career. He didn't really want to lose his drummer. And so I said to Chappie, I said, "General James, sir, I think it's in the best interest of the country that I take a gig with the circus."
For national security, yeah. Well, it was a good move, and that's a tough gig, the circus. I've had some friends who did that gig, Barnum and Bailey, and it's there's 1 million shows a week. They're long, they cover a zillion styles, and it just is nonstop. You have monitors everywhere, and you're catching every act. It's a literally a three-ring circus.
Yeah,
that you're catching.
And so we did, I did 1,100 shows with them over a 2-year period. And, each show was 3 hours.
Yeah.
It's nonstop. For the drummer, it's nonstop, I could, I had to, I can still roll for days, right? But
well, the guys on the trapeze, I mean, you got to catch all that stuff. inside of the charts you're reading.
You gotta have the right stick. And Bopworks makes that stick. It's the perfect sound for any venue. I really understand the problems drummers are facing, and I know what a good drumstick sounds like. I'm a self-professed drumstick nerd. Big manufacturers don't make them like they used to, but we do. So you can dial in the right sound, get exactly what you want. They're the best jazz drumsticks that have ever been created.
The sound reinforcement that the show was using was not very sophisticated, so we played Madison Square Garden for 11 weeks back then, and we would have about 18,000 people for each show, and the only sound reinforcement on the drums was one overhead mic. That was it.
Wow.
So I think that there's, and yeah, you were right. There's 3 different acts. They're not coordinated in any way, shape, or form. And of course, each act has its own ego. And so, as a drummer, you got to get that vision, and you have to learn that there are anticipatory muscle movements that both the humans would make before they did the trick, and also animals. Right, so the tigers and lions and whatever, the elephants, they would have this setup move that they would make. And so I learned to key in on those setups so I could catch.
Oh, I never thought of that. I mean, drummers for years have been sort of mind readers in that you're trying to negotiate the time with the whole band and they've got their backs to you.
Right.
You're trying to read all those personalities and everything, but I never thought about the animals as well, giving away their next motions with their little animal body language, I suppose.
And I still have a set of cymbals from when I was playing on the circus, and one of the things I really learned how to anticipate is that when they line those cats in front of you, the lions or the tigers, and they had to relieve themselves, the tail would go up, and they had a range. They had like a 30 foot, 20 foot range. I saw that tail go up, and I would duck behind the cymbal, and the cymbal would take the hit, right?
That's hilarious. In theater, they talk about the spit zone. If you're that close, where you're having the actors, you're in the range of that. But I never thought about that with the animals.
Going back a little bit further. I did the last 2 cities of the first U.S. tour of the Moscow Circus. And we were in Springfield, Massachusetts, and I had a Russian conductor that didn't speak any English whatsoever. And so on this one night, I'm playing this act, and the Moscow Circus is a European-style circus with just one single ring. Right, and so all my focus is on this one act, and this was a trapeze, but it was a still trapeze with acrobats, and so you have 2 or 3 people up there, they're doing their tricks, and I'm concentrating on catching the tricks, and the conductor had me set up in front of the band, so it was the drums first. He wanted to make sure I could see everything, and then the saxophone section, the trombone section, the trumpet section were all behind me. So I'm really concentrating on catching this act, and it's a big, majestic piece of music. And this one night, I'm playing, and the trumpet section drops out, and then the trombone section drops out, and then the saxophone section drops out, and it's a drum solo, and it shouldn't be a drum solo. And so I quickly turned behind me to see what happened, and there are 2 bears fighting where the trombone section used to be.
That'll unnerve you.
The whole band is lined up, to the side of the stage, and nobody says anything to me, including my dad.
Show must go on, baby.
Show must go on. So these bears were being positioned for the next act, and it's called the leash act, where there's no cage, and the bears had long leashes on them. And I guess, they got into a little dispute, and it just kind of rolled over into the band.
Watch out where those cats go, and be careful of the bears, right?
I think what our cymbals brought to the Sabian family is that there is lots more hand hammering. They're all hand hammered, and so you really have to perfect the hammering technique and where to hammer on the cymbal. You don't want to get the cymbal too thin in a lot of places. They were willing to try it, and I think we came out with a great product that is a great musical instrument.
At some point, you got an interest in the industry side of things. I mean, you've worked for some amazing companies. We'll touch on them, but I know you work for Remo, MIDCO, Firth, and D'Addario. Those are some of the bigger companies in this industry. How did you get involved in the business side of things?
My goal in life was to become a studio drummer, and that's why I studied with Ed Shaughnessy and Sonny Igo.
Mm-hmm.
Sonny had played the Ed Sullivan shows, Jackie Gleason shows. He was a CBS staff drummer, and so
Shaughnessy was on the Tonight Show.
And it was, so that was my goal. And I only did 2 years with Ringling Brothers, and I said, Dad, I got to play a full song again that doesn't end in that chord. I just. Mm-hmm. And so I left the show, and with my first wife Cheryl, we moved down to Florida, Sarasota, and I was gigging quite a bit, but I knew that Sarasota, well, it's a beautiful city, was not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in either New York or Los Angeles to pursue my goal. Mm-hmm. And we made the decision to go out to LA, and we had a newborn daughter. And, and it's a funny thing about kids, they like to eat multiple times a day, right?
Go
so
figure.
I'm just trying to break into LA. And while I was with the circus, I had received endorsements. I became an endorser of Remo for drumheads. And while I was doing that show, they would send me product to test. And then I would write up reports and send the products back to them. Mm-hmm. With the report. And so I built up this relationship with a guy by the name of Lloyd McCausland, who was...
I know Lloyd very well, yeah.
He was the VP of marketing at the time. Mm-hmm. And so when I moved out to LA, I needed to get a day gig. And so I reached out to Lloyd, and as it turned out, my timing was very good because Remo was just getting ready to introduce the PTS drums, the pre-tuned system, heads and drums, and they needed some help in customer service. So I got a job in customer service, entry-level job, making $7.50 an hour, $15,000 a year.
It's the early 80s?
This was 1981.
Yeah. I had one of those kids.
And what happened, just totally unexpectedly, is that, I'm handling customers' problems. What happened to my delivery? There's a defect on this or whatever. And so I'm just naturally curious. And so I just started asking people questions about this thing and that process and so forth, and how does this work? And I just became fascinated with the world of manufacturing and product development. Mm-hmm. And so Remo saw this. He saw my interest. He saw my curiosity. And he started giving me more responsibilities. And so I'd been there for about a year and a half, 2 years, I guess. And we were not doing a lot of drum clinics at the time, but Remo came by my desk. I had the front desk in the office, and he said, "Hey, Rick, let me talk to you for a second." He said, you know, we don't do a lot of drum clinics, but I think with these pre-tuned drums, we should get out there and do some clinics. I said, Remo, great idea. He said, you know, and I said, who do you think we should do the clinics with? He said, well, I think we should do a clinic with Louis Bellson, Billy Cobham, Vic Firth. I said, man, that's a hell of a lineup. I said, where do you think we should do the clinic? He said, I think the first one we should do in Manhattan, New York City. I said, great. When? When are we going to do it? He said, I think we should do it in about 30 days. Oh, man, that's going to be great. He said, yeah, put it together.
There you go.
So what I did was, you know, first of all, I had to contact Louis and Billy Cobham and Vic, find a date that they could all appear. And then I had only been to one clinic in my life prior to that, and that was a Roy Burns clinic that happened up in West Springfield, Massachusetts. And he had been touring with he was still on Rogers drums and Feisty at the time. And so I knew that I had to now get a place. So I called the New York Commerce Department there and figured out where, and I had to explain to them what a drum clinic was. We ended up at the Sheraton Hotel there, Midtown. And so I got a ballroom. And then I figured, okay, well, now I got to let people know that we got this clinic. And I used to be a member of the Musicians Union, 802 there. And so back then they had a messaging service. So I put a message out. I said, I want this to go to all the drummers in the union. They sent that message out that we're going to do this drum clinic with these guys on this date. And then I handmade some posters and sent them out to Manny's and Sam Ash, right? And it was a professional drum center at the time. And then I got Remo's Rolodex. And for those of you that don't know what a Rolodex is,
contacts.
And, so I started calling guys that I knew of, right? And I called, you know, like Art Taylor and, of course, Sonny Igo and Charles Persip. And I mean, all these guys, Charlie Perry. I called all these guys up, Max Roach, Mel Lewis. I called Elvin Jones. And so I called all of these people up and personally invited them, said, Remo would like to personally invite you to this event that we're having. And so I didn't tell Remo that I did any of this stuff. So when he came in and he saw the setup and everybody came that I had invited, with the exception of Elvin. And the only reason Elvin didn't show up was because he had a gig in another part of the country. And so when like Mel Lewis and, you know, all these guys came, Remo said, what the hell did you do? How did you put this together? So I just kind of took him through the sequence. And then, like within 2 weeks, I was in charge of artist relations for the company. So,
there you go.
Artist relations. And then I kind of, over time, I went up the ladder, became national sales manager, then became national sales and marketing manager, then became director of marketing and sales globally.
Well, you worked for some large companies there in the percussion industry. When I got involved with my little cymbal company, what amazed me was how small the percussion industry really is.
Yeah.
I don't think most people realize that most of these companies are out there on a wing and a prayer trying to make this work, and they have enormous marketing expenses, and they're grossing maybe a few $100,000 a year, and it's really a tough go. There are grocery stores that outsell the domestic cymbal industry.
Right.
You know these things, right? I mean, one Kroger may take in more than, say, Zildjian. That's no slight on Zildjian. That's a great company and the big dog in the game. But was that something you had to realize, or did you were working for a lot larger firms?
Right. I mean, you're 100% correct. And also what's happened since 2006, which was the peak of the percussion industry, and really the peak of the music products industry. There's been a decline in the sales of acoustic drums and cymbals, and of course drum heads and drumsticks. There's a trickle down effect to the point where at the end of 2016, there had been the steady decline to the point where the industry was actually just, as far as drum sets were concerned, 50% of what it was at the peak.
With 100 more companies.
And that had an impact, of course, on cymbals. That dropped by about 30%, drumsticks, drum heads between 15 and 20%, and now it's starting to pick up again a little bit. So it'll be interesting to see if we ever regain where we were at the peak in 2006.
Yeah, I got in 2004 with Bosphorus cymbals, doubled our sales in 1 year, doubled them again the next year. I'm going like, man, this is like low hanging fruit. Yeah, but then I don't think we ever reached those numbers again because everything fell off a cliff. So do you think that's coming back?
It's hard to say. It's hard to predict because while there's people, of course, are still making music. They're choosing different tools and to use to make that music. So people are using computers. And it's unfortunate because it's also the same. The other thing that's occurring is that the bands are smaller. There's like even during doing the Ringling show when I did it, we carried 5 musicians and hired 10 in every town that we went to. And then the last time that I saw the show, which was a few years ago before they folded up, they had maybe 6 or 7 musicians total, right? So there's less opportunities, less live playing opportunities, right? And then of course the way that people make money now, when they're recording music and trying to sell their music, that dynamic has changed considerably as well. And so there's less people that are choosing to make it their profession, but there's still this need to play, right? And so while I have what I do now, my coaching, my business coaching practice with a third of my clients are music industry clients, 2/3 are outside the music business. But I'm also involved now in a new venture, which is called Caleb Chapman's Soundhouse Performance Studio. And what we're doing there is we're providing the places to play. Because while the industry has gone through some consolidation in total, there are still a lot of people that want to play. And in the music industry, we have great companies that manufacture great products. We have great retailers that know how to sell it. We have great educators that know how to teach it. But the missing component has been the place to play, right? And as an industry, we've been, in my opinion, far too reliant on the school system to provide that place to play. And unfortunately, the way that music is taught, it hasn't changed a lot over numerous decades. There's dedicated teachers that are there for the kids, but the styles of music are not as inclusive as they could be or should be. And with Soundhouse, we're offering all different styles of music and providing that place to play to enhance what's happening in the music school.
That's great. We'll put some things about that in the show notes, so be sure to check that if you're watching this. The other thing I know you're involved with is the sessions.
Yeah.
With Jules Follett and her crew. Tell me about that.
Well, the Sessions was created by Jules Follett, who wrote the book Sticks and Skins, and and that's a photo book of about 500 different drummers. I may be the only drummer in the country who's not in that book.
I'm not in it. I was working with her to put some artists in there when she did that book. Yeah.
And it's a great book. And what she realized is she was interviewing these drummers and also doing the photo shoots, is that a number of drummers, like other musicians, were not as financially as successful as what she perceived they would be. Right.
And
so she didn't want her efforts to help drummers just stop there with the book. So she put together this nonprofit called The Sessions, and our mission is to go to universities and colleges and talk to the music students about how to create a successful career in the music industry. So we have a panel of people that have done very well in the industry. So it's moderated by Dom Famularo, right, which of course is a great educator and really the drum ambassador to the world.
Yeah, he did my show last month.
Yeah, I mean, Dom is just it's Mr. Enthusiasm, right?
You think? Yeah.
And I when he drank coffee, so he settled down a little bit.
I love Dom.
Oh yeah, and then we have Paul Quinn, who's an entertainment business attorney. He represents some great musicians. And then we have Christine Ullman, who's a singer from the Saturday Night Live show. She's been doing it for over 25 years. She's still doing it. Liberty DeVito, and Liberty's background.
Sure. Good guy, yeah.
And then Carlos Guzman, who does production management for people like Barry Gibbs and Max Weinberg and numerous others, Stevie Wonder. And so, and then I talk about the music product side of it a little bit, but I talk more about how you can take everything that you've just heard on the panel and create a game plan for success. Right, so there's a tool that I use called the Vision Traction Organizer, which comes out of the entrepreneurial operating system that I teach businesses. And I talk about, core values. So understand what your core values are, what's really important to you, your guiding principles, and surround yourself with people that share those core values. Right, and then where do you want to put your core focus? You can't be everything to everybody. So decide what your focus is going to be, and then come up. Then what we work on is, okay, so what do you want to do 5 years from now? Where do you want to be in your career 5 years from now? All right, so then where do you want to be at the end of the year? All right, then what do you got to do in the next 90 days to get to where you want to be in a year? All right, so if you can't take care of the next 90 days, you got to be able to take care of, you're not going to be able to take care of the year. And then what do we got to achieve this next week so that we can achieve what we want to do in the next 90 days and achieve it in the year, 5 years, and so forth. So what I do is I help them, I give them a framework to work from.
And this is something that musicians oftentimes don't pay attention to. What do you want to do next year? Well, I want to be better than I am now. What do you want to do? I want to play better gigs. And they're willing to practice day and night and very dedicated, but oftentimes are not versed in the logistics of business.
Right. And so, well, if you really want to progress as a drummer, you need to practice with purpose, right? And it's the same thing with your career. You want to execute activities with a purpose that are going to drive you forward to achieve your goal.
And what's the name of your company where you do this coaching?
It's Traction Business Coaching. So now I've had it for 4 years, and I started the entrepreneurial operating system. I brought that into my practice 3 years ago, and it's been wonderful. I mean, Sabian is one of my clients. I've got a couple of school band and orchestra retailers that are a client. I have another client is the Kanalea ukulele firm in Hawaii.
Ukes are big now.
What's that?
Ukes are big now, ukuleles.
Oh, yeah, they're huge. They're huge. They make a very high-end, top-quality instruments.
Yeah, I've seen their stuff. You detailed your experiences at Remo, but you also worked for some other top-notch companies. Tell us more about that.
Yes. So after 13 years, I left Remo, and then I joined one of our customers, MIDCO International, which was at the time the 5th largest distribution company in the music industry. And then I joined Vic Firth as president of Vic Firth, which I had a great team of people there. And I was president of that company for 9 years. And then I was recruited by D'Addario, which is the largest manufacturer of musical strings, guitar strings. We had, by the time I left, 800 people at our factory in New York, and then another few hundred at Rico Reed's. We had bought ProMark, and we owned Evans Heads, and then we had distribution centers that we owned in Australia and in the UK and in Canada. So they brought me on to help manage that company, help bring strategy to that company, and then help mentor the next generation of D'Addario. So I did that for 8 years. And so from there, after I left D'Addario at the end of 2013 is when I started my company, Traction Business Coaching. And along the line, I learned a ton of stuff. I was fortunate in that, I got to work with Remo very closely.
One of the true visionaries of this industry.
Yeah, absolutely.
Remo Belli. Yeah.
And then, I worked with Lowell Samuels from MIDCO, and then, of course, Vic Firth.
Another visionary.
When I first started with Vic, he was still doing the BSO, right? He was the chair of the percussion section for the BSO, Boston Symphony Orchestra, and then he was the chair of the percussion department at the New England Conservatory. So, I mean, from Vic, I mean, he had a tremendous work ethic, and he just every day, what can we do better? What can we do better? And then, of course, I was with Jim D'Addario. So, and Jim was always, how can we make the product better? And then at the other end of the spectrum, I had Remo. What can we create today? Right? And so, Remo would always come in, hey, I thought of this, and we should do that. We should, And so I had this opportunity to work with these great minds and absorb everything that they had to offer, and then bring what I had to offer to the table for them and help them grow their companies.
Well, you certainly did. Well, it's a pretty short format show, Rick, so I think we've covered a good bit. I appreciate you doing the show. You have such great experience, life experience for us to draw from your experience as a drummer, as an educator, as a business professional. I mean, you're hitting on all the checking all the boxes. So now you live in Atlanta now, right?
I do, yeah. I live just outside of Atlanta, and I'm getting connected here in the community, and it's a great city. I live 35 minutes from the airport, which is a good thing.
Very good, yeah. Well, I'm across town from you, so sometimes these Skype things are across the world, but let's have some lunch one day, okay?
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Take care. This is your host, Michael Vosbein, and I'd like to thank our friends at Sabian Cymbals, Sound Synergies, Stanton Moore Drum Academy, and Drum Center of Portsmouth. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.